Hey, this week on Free Arkansas, we talk with Senator Pro Tem Breanne Davis. And so if you want to know what's coming up on the legislature next session, you want to know about what she thinks about the post-Trump Republican Party down the road, data centers, and a number of other things, come listen to this podcast and click below. All right, welcome to Free Arkansas. I'm Andy McNeill, and today we're going to talk to a friend of mine, but I want to start just by telling a little bit about Free Arkansas. What we like to do is just talk about the free expression of ideas and things that we can do to move the state forward. And so to do that, we talk to an array of different people, CEOs and politicians, people that are trying to make a difference. And today I have one of those people on, Breanne Davis, who is the state senator in District 25 that represents mainly Pope County, but also Conway County, right? Part of the, yep. And so,
most of Conway County and City of Dardanelle.
And City of Dardanelle, yeah. And so, Breanne, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So one of the things I probably should say up front is I've known Breanne for, I don't know, a long time, like many years, and I've supported her campaigns, and I've loved to watch the growth, because I still remember when you first ran your very first campaign for school board. And I think it's super cool to, see what you've accomplished, which we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And, but I'm also friends with your in-laws, and I've done stuff with your husband. Your in-laws, I think, are super special. Not just to me, but to lots of people. Are they that way inside the family unit too? Or do they have like flaws that none of us else get to see?
Well, everyone has flaws, of course. They would say that. If I said, "Oh, they're perfect," they would say, "Why did you say that? We're human." But I think to know Johnny and Steven is to love them, and they are. They're consistently who they are at the grocery store, around town, and in their own home. So I think they've created such a great culture and legacy for generations to come.
Yeah, they've really made an impact on Russellville. So they're really quite special. And I've loved watching your family grow over the years. And so, and like I'm like you, we both have 4 kids. Are there things about like you would say like this is kind of like who we are?
Yes, I mean, I think from the beginning we always say you're a Davis. We always say love God, love people, and work harder than anybody else. And so I think we've worked really hard at those soft skills with our kids, making eye contact, shaking hands, having manners, catch the door. We are still working on with some of our kids. Some have mastered it to walk in a room and look around, be a problem solver, right? Like anticipate a need, be a problem solver, figure it out. And I've told my kids probably from, back in when they were 3 in the back of the car arguing over Gatorade or whatever, they argue over, and just say, them saying, "Mom, that's not fair." I've said for a long time, life's not fair. And the sooner you figure that out, the better. And it's probably not great to say it to a 3-year-old, but it's sort of like that culture, like get out in the world and work hard and treat people well.
And like, if your kids say to you something like, well, so-and-so doesn't have to do that. Do you also revert back like, that's what Davises do? I'm sorry.
I say a lot to my children, like, I am not the parent of your friends. I am the parent of you. And because we get that a lot on social media and stuff like that. Like our kids, like Riley didn't get it till he was 16 and it's on my phone, and he's 18 now. But a lot of like, well, but all my friends have Instagram, all my friends. I'm like, well, that's great. I'm not parenting your friends. I'm parenting you.
I think that I've learned a lot from having a big family, being part of a big family. Like, what have you learned about being part of a big family?
Man, it's so much conflict resolution, which I don't mind conflict. John Paul doesn't mind conflict. I always say confrontation does not have to be a negative thing. But we make our kids like, hey, go and apologize, say what you're sorry for, ask for forgiveness, and y'all hug it out. Yeah. But, just teaching those skills like, hey, face it head on. And you got to do a lot of that when you've got 4 kids and different personalities.
I think the first time you ran for office was when you ran for the school board. Is that right? Do I remember?
Yes.
Or did you run for something before that?
Nope, it was school board, 2009.
But I'm just curious, like way back when, like, why did you want to run?
Well, back then I had a 1-year-old. And I always feel like we all have like our own role to play in community. It's like we all have strengths, weaknesses, things that we're passionate about. And I just have never been like the PTO mom. And I'm very grateful for PTO moms. I don't even say that in any kind of way, because they do all the things that help, make the world go around in the classroom throughout the year. But I just felt like I knew I wanted to run for office, and I wanted to be involved in my kid's education early on. And, like I said, he was just one. I didn't want to wait till he was in school. And there weren't really any parents that had school-age kids on the school board at that time. I think there was one person left on. And I think that boards like that, you need everybody, you need all walks of life. And so it just, to me, was a time that I could, step up and give back to the community and serve in a different way.
And you won the first time, right? Am I right? You've never lost an election. Is that correct?
I have not lost, but I had to like knock on wood somewhere, but it's like, no, I haven't. I won by 44 votes. It was a close race.
Super close. When you look at like with the formula to run for the various offices from school board to state rep to state senator, what do you think the winning formula is? Like, what do you credit the winning to?
Well, I think one, you have to know your voice. And I mean, that kind of sounds cheesy, but it's like when you're in a campaign, and I've been in so many different campaigns with different campaign managers and consultants I've worked with, and everyone has a sort of a different opinion. Like, you need to do this. You need to send out more mail or do more radio, or you need to say this or make a post about that. Whatever. Everyone's got an opinion. And I think you have to know like what your voice is, what your boundaries are. Like, are you going to negative campaign? Are you not? Are you will, like all those things. And so for me, I think I've had great teams along the way, but just because someone says you need to do this doesn't mean I have to do it. If it doesn't feel right for me and my gut and where what I want to be a representation of me or my family, then I just say no. And I think you've got to know yourself well enough to be able to do that, because you do get a lot of pressure on campaigns because everyone wants to, everyone helping you wants you to win. And they're all really opinionated. So
of course, one of the things like I learned, because when I did this, running for something, I didn't do anything negative. And but I look back on it, I think had I really honed in on people's weaknesses, and which are very personal weaknesses, which I could have, maybe that would have made the difference. I don't know. But you've had to be on the receiving end of a lot of that negativity. I don't recall you being as negative during the campaigns, but how does it feel to have to endure stuff that you just know is, bogus or a little bit misogynistic or what's it like being on that side?
Well, I think two things. It is hard and frustrating because I'm very justice driven, and I'm like, that's not right. That's not the truth, And it's just frustrating that you can say the truth over and over, but people are going to believe what they're going to believe. But honestly, it fuels me. I just through life have gone through things, and it just it's made my skin thicker. I think I love to be underestimated, and I often am, and I welcome the challenge. So
I think I've got this right. You're the first elected representative to give birth during office. Am I right about that?
Yeah, the first and only right now still woman serving in the legislature to give birth while serving,
which is really cool. And I think you're the first, and I don't know if this is official, if you're the Senate Pro Tem yet, or if there's still another vote that has to happen, but you can kind of clarify that for me, but that you would also be the first woman to do that. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, right now I'm the Senate Pro Tem designee. Right. So yeah, we'll take the official vote in January.
That's right. But, I guess I don't know if you can assume that it's in the bag, but, I guess it's probably looking pretty good.
Yeah, I feel good about it, but I take nothing for granted and we'll keep working.
When we look back over the arc of time, right, there's all sorts of things where we've made progress. When you think like, I don't know, like if we go back not that long ago, like 100+ years ago, and women didn't even get to vote.
Yeah.
And it gets a little worse as we go back in time for some things, right?
Yeah. And I can't remember, I don't know the exact number. I want to say 22. I think there's 35 members of the Senate, but I think in all of Arkansas history, there's like 22 women total that have served in the Arkansas State Senate.
Yeah.
And I'm the youngest elected at 35. I was sworn in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and like you said about the school board, I think we need a cross section of people that represent, including a cross section of ideas. So over the years, you voted on all sorts of things. How do you develop trust in listening to other people? Or is it just like, hey, the Republicans said we should do it, let's do it? Because oftentimes what you do is not really political in the Republican Democrat sense, right? Most of it's not that way. I would think.
No, yeah. I mean, so many of our bills, I'm sure I've seen numbers, but I wish I could pull them, are like bipartisan votes. I mean, it's like most of the Senate, maybe there's one person that voted present or something, but right. So many of our votes, Republicans and Democrats are voting for. So yeah, trust is like the only currency I think that matters in politics is like your word, which builds trust. And if you don't have that with people, you don't have much. So there are people that I know, it's like we have different, we have attorneys, we have contractors and builders and realtors, and, we've got all kinds of different people in our legislature. And so the ones that I do trust that I know are in that profession, if a bill pertains to it, I can ask about it and make sense of it. And I also have people back at home that I know, like, if we have seen some weird bills about funeral homes, and I don't know anything about funeral homes, but I know some people that I can text and ask pretty immediately. And they'll get with, and I'll just say, hey, have you heard about this? Like, can you tell me what this does? Is this good for your industry? We deal with some really like niche things. So yeah, I think it's just building that network and learning over time who's giving you good information. And I always tell people, like, lobbyist, constituent, like, I don't care who, like, what the group is. I'm like, tell me the good and the bad. Tell me, like, who's opposed to it and why. Like, I'm a big girl. I'll decide. Like, I'm happy to fight and have opposition. I don't mind that, but you need to tell me that up front. I need to understand the whole issue. Like, don't just feed me the good things and then leave me hanging out there when you didn't share the bad with me too. So
I'm a huge proponent of capitalism and freedom. So I like liberalism in the classic definition of like, I have the liberty to do the things that I want to do. Not in a modern sense of like being liberal with other people's money. And then to me, what I look at when I look at stuff, I like the idea, does it create growth? Does it create prosperity? Does it increase the standard of living and quality of life for, health, taxation, education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, one of the things I think about that isn't great is I feel like we don't have, like, if we go state by state, we don't really have great two-party states, two parties in each state. Do you think that's a bad thing for us? Like here in Arkansas, it's like Republicans control everything. California Democrats control everything. Does that serve us well, you think?
Well, I think, the super majority, like we've got a super majority in Arkansas. And so I think just because we're human, we like naturally find things to fight about. So like our own party, we have factions within our own party, right? And I often say it's wild how often the woke right is meeting the woke left.
Yeah.
They're both, of these like extreme factions of our party are meeting each other. And so I think the closer you are to just a basic, simple majority, like in the state legislature, if we had 55 Republicans in the House instead of 81 or however many they've got, we've got 29 Republicans in the Senate. If we had 18 or 19 instead of 29, then you're forced to work on, I think, shaping policy a little better. Because you don't have as much, you don't have that wiggle room of, well, you're just going to get this many votes. You don't have to work for it in the same kind of way. So I think the closer you are to a simple majority, either party forces you to work with the other side. And there's probably some pros to that like produce better policy and make things move a little slower. And you have to be a little more thoughtful. But then there's like some things that I think are really great about us being a supermajority in Arkansas. And we've seen some really drastic changes in our state in the last 12 years since Republicans have taken majority for the first time in our state's history. And so, I think there's pros and cons to both ways, but yeah.
And how do you feel about like when people accuse politicians of being hypocrites? And I actually made a big list of hypocritical things. I'll give you a simple example. So, I think that, we live in a world where the president of the United States just doles out, and this is both sides, executive orders. And so how do you I don't know if you encounter that, or how do you try to stay true to yourself?
We do have a lot of conversations, I'd say, like internally on that. And internally, I just mean like some members in the Senate, that I serve with. And we're like, yeah, that's cool right now. But do we like that if like something we don't like comes up? Like, how do we, and so I think there's pockets of us having conversations like that. Because it is, it's going to flip and turn at some point. Are you going to like it when it's the other person?
Well, it's like the filibuster, right? Like, it's really tempting to say, let's get rid of the filibuster to have this vote. But then sure enough, something you don't like is going to roll through that same little mousetrap. And, so like, I look at like, and so, or, it's stuff like, hey, we're all about not, like controlling the fiscal budget, but yet we're going to run a deficit every single year, something like that,
Yeah.
And so, okay. So I'm curious, how involved you are with the state party.
I'm more involved now. I was a county committee chair back in 2007 and 8 or 8 and 9. I can't, somewhere in there. And was pretty involved with the state party then. And then kind of fell out of it over the years. And now being in leadership in the Senate, I'm kind of like back in the mix and at the meetings and a lot more involved. And with running Senator Cotton's campaign, that also puts me in the mix with the state party, just working with them across the state.
Okay. So I'm curious I made this list about post-Trump things, and so because you'll be involved with the party long after he's out of office and gone, and I'm curious because you're in the inner works of it, how much of some of the things that sort of define him as a person will go on, like still happen. So I just made this list, and I'm just curious what you think. And I'll preface this a couple different ways. So I had the opportunity. I interviewed George Bush the other day, and so which was super cool. We did it for like an hour and a half, and he's all class. Like even if you disagree with him, he's just class. He's a class act, and so one of my issues with just Donald Trump as a person is just his style of leadership, the way that he does things just aren't as attractive to me. And that's a kind way to say it. But I also think he's just one of a kind. So like, I'm going to make this the contention that like, he's like a comedian that can tell a really dirty joke and no one gets offended. But as soon as the next person comes along, everybody's aghast at the joke. But so like, I'm curious, do you think that like, things like making up names for your opponent, is that going to still be a thing? Or do you think that's going to like go with Donald Trump whenever that happens?
Well, that's a good question. I do think he is unique, his personality. Like, I feel like I see other people running for office trying to replicate sort of like this Trump effect.
Right.
And it's like, you can't do that. Only Trump can do that. And,
it has like a scratch the board sort of effect for me when I see someone try to he just had a way of doing it. Even his tweets are that way. When I sit there and go like, other people just cannot replicate this. You know?
Yeah. And I do. I think people will continue to try to do it. And honestly, like, you look on Facebook or social media and people are doing it there, you know, just regular people or fake accounts or whatever, not even people running for office. They're just so vile in the comment section. So it's sort of become part of this like political culture, really.
Well, it's one of the things I really dislike. I think that it doesn't serve us. You know, like even one time we wanted to have a dialogue about how some of that viciousness affects people. And I just happened to look at stuff that like people would write about Sarah Sanders. And so like we ended up not really talking about it a lot, but like awful things. You know, just, and you sit there and go like, and they serve no purpose, right? It's just nothing but meanness. And so, you know, and I think there's this trickle down effect. And what I wonder about is like, you know, will the Republican Party be back to where like when John McCain in that town hall where that woman said Barack Obama's a Muslim and he took the microphone and said, no, he's a good guy. Like, do you think you go back there, or is it just, there's just too much like angst? What do you think?
So I think that's going to. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think it's very like multi-layered. People have to decide to like be better. I don't know. That's not a great way to say it, right? But like, here's a great example. Like, I think about Jamie Scott. She is in the Senate with me. She's a Democrat, represents North Little Rock area.
Right.
And we are members of the Future Caucus, which is, it's just a group of bipartisan, like millennial and Gen Zers that are elected to state legislatures. And so we come together and we work on, you know, we just talk about stuff, how we work together and like the divide in our country, the divides in our states. And so Jamie and I, we kind of joke that we're like on this speaking tour. We've gone to, like, we've spoken publicly together several times now. Like, we ended up at Wellesley at something for Hillary Clinton's thing, which I never thought I would go to that. And, you know, and then we ended up in Santa Fe with something with a group that Melinda Gates has. And then we've spoke more recently here in Russellville. And, you know, I think people are afraid to be seen like aligning with the other side or the other party or whatever. And so I think it's going to take us as elected officials to say that, hey, she's not a bad person. She just thinks differently than we do. Or, hey, there's a lot of things we agree on. And we all have the same goal, but we just have a different path. Like, we think a different path is right in getting there. So, and Jamie and I have done, like, I truly respect her. I value her friendship. She's a friend. And I think that's happening a lot more behind the scenes, like in the state legislature. I can say, like, I have good working relationships across the aisle, and several of us do. But that's not what you see like on the TV clips. That's not what you see on Facebook, because everything has to be so divisive. And so, but then I think it takes us changing the culture. And this is what because like I said, a lot of people are maybe afraid to align or empathize with the other side at fear of being called, you know, like weak or like a rhino or whatever. And my argument is that it actually makes me better. Like, I'm very partisan, and Jamie is very partisan. But there's plenty of space for us to work together and respect each other and get along. And that doesn't make me weak, and it doesn't make her weak. It makes us stronger and better. But then there's like this war online between just like people, right? You know, just citizens. And it's so vile, and
it's awful. Yeah,
and it's hard because this is like a political rule. They say if you're explaining, you're losing, and so they're like, you can't. And I've taken to Facebook many times with lengthy videos to explain something, because I think if people want to listen, they can understand, you know, but it's like, do they have the desire to? But I think that that makes it hard and complicated because you've got several cultures that you've got to change. And I think we just have to choose it.
So over the years, you've passed all sorts of things. Tell me, like, the couple bills you're the most proud of that you're a part of.
Gosh, I feel like there are so many. I mean, I can say I know like a personal one. I learned about when coming into office that there are people with disabilities that are discriminated against when it comes to life-saving organ transplants. Now they're supposed to get the same medical care like at the federal level, but there's sort of, I don't know, this loophole. And in states, you'll see people, there's a page that I follow, and this happened a few years ago, but a little boy in Florida was born with Down syndrome and needed a heart transplant. And he ended up passing away somewhere around 9 months old because they refused to give him a heart transplant simply because he had Down syndrome, not because he didn't meet any of the other metric, like not anything else. And you know, what I have found over the years is that it's not necessarily like this, like the big hospital, like Children's Hospital. If you think like the bigger hospitals are like UAMS, but it's all these maybe medical professionals like back at home or in rural communities that don't really have updated information about people with Down syndrome or different disabilities. Because like, think about, they're not going to like continuing education on that stuff. They didn't maybe necessarily get it in medical school. So they have really like old, antiquated information and are basically telling parents like their life isn't valuable. Like they're not going to have a terrible quality of life. They're going to like all these like horrible, heartbreaking things that are not really the full truth of our children. And so anyways, all that to say, I started working with a mom out of Conway who has a little girl. She's probably a teenager now. It's been several years with Down syndrome. And we ran a bill that basically said, like in Arkansas, you cannot discriminate on a disability alone for an organ transplant. And we named it Lila's Law after her daughter. Yeah. And it was really cool. That was like where the Down syndrome community kind of like brought me in and brought me up to speed. And I love that community and I've learned a lot, but that's something that to me is just like, it's personal and I know it's making a difference in different lives around the state. Right. But then you have things like the LEARNS Act, right. Which I am really proud of. And it was really like such a fire to be thrown into. And that impacts like way more people across the state. It was like a more meaningful, impactful legislation in a different way. And I love that was something I got to be part of. Do you think
there's on that bill, do you think, well, first off, I think one of the things that maybe we all could agree on, I think that education is super important. Like if you try to bring someone to the state, as I would try to bring people to the companies we have, and the very first thing people would look at is the scores on education, right? So even if we say the list out there don't matter, they matter to the people that are moving here, right? And so, so I think anything that we can do to drive education is you have to give it a thumbs up. But do you think there's cleanup things with the LEARN Acts? Do you look at it and say like, okay, there's things we got to button up on this, or peer like, or not? I'm just curious.
Yeah. And we have been making adjustments along the way. So I've said, the governor has said, like in all of her town halls, her and Secretary Lila did town halls in the year following LEARNS. And we have always said, like, there's no perfect bill. There's no perfect piece of legislation. Of course, we're going to have to update and change some things and see, like, things that look good on paper don't play out always in real life in the same way. So, yes, we have made adjustments and there's more to make. I'm sure of it. And even if you separate, like, EFAs, the education freedom accounts, and then all of LEARNS that impacted public schools. There's things that we've had to tweak within public schools and things that have been going really well and things that maybe we want to pump more money into and do more with that have been successful. Like merit pay, for example. When merit pay first took effect, no teacher would tell anybody that they got it. And I'm like, why? You should be proud. You're doing a great job. You're growing your kids. Like, what a great thing. You're being rewarded for the work you're doing every day in the classroom. But it was such taboo. Well, like 3 years later, we've given like $50 million, is it, I think, to over 12,000 teachers across the state, and they're all talking about it,
Yeah.
And like, so one thing that we need to do, I think, is, which we'll see in the next like year or two, is ensure that K-2 teachers are eligible for merit pay as classroom teachers. But we haven't been assessing K-2, so we don't have test scores in the same way that third grade and up have. But like, those are the ones we're putting pressure on, is like K-2, have them ready and on reading level by third grade. So we need to be rewarding those teachers that are just putting in blood, sweat, and tears, right? So, yeah.
It'll be, one of the things, you perhaps know this, but like Milton, do you know who Milton Friedman is? He's
Yes.
like the great economist. So he wrote a book actually called Freedom and Capitalism. And in that book, he proposes all these different things. And one of them is around education. Now, his argument is very different than the argument you guys were making, although it's the same sort of voucher programs. And it's really where it all came from. And it really stemmed from like use of your own capital. But, when I look at the LEARNS Act, and I've been trying to get smarter on this to like how it affects communities. But part of what I think is going to be interesting to watch over the next number of years is, okay, I take my kid out, I put him in some small school, am I going to get the same quality of education, and how do I hold that school accountable the same way that I would hold, a public school where they're both getting government funding, right? Like, how do I do that? And, how does that also impact, the local communities? You've had your share of baseball, but one of the things that I witnessed that was sort of interesting, I think, is when USSSA baseball really entered at first graders and second graders, it really changed the dynamics of the rec team, because the dads that were the most active took their kids to go play. So I wonder, the impact of what will happen to communities, and maybe it needs some time to play out. But are those some of the things that you guys are just looking at as well, saying, okay, like you said, it's not perfect. We're going to look at all the edges and make sure we can kind of button it up as we notice the problems.
Yeah, I do think it's not, in the beginning, everyone said, well, there's not that many private schools. Like, why? It's just Little Rock and some in Northwest Arkansas. I think over time we will see more schools, and I hope maybe more specialized schools pop up that really can meet different kids' educational needs. So, there was this great debate over kids with disabilities, and
right.
The public school said we're just stuck with these kids, which really bothered me. But I heard that over and over again from public school administrators. But then I look at the work that Easter Seals is doing in Little Rock. There are people driving in from like Stuttgart, like very far away every single day, to take their kids to school at Easter Seals, where they are getting the education and the attention and the care that they need. And they're meeting their kids' educational needs. And that is life-changing for a family. And I think over time, we'll see things like that maybe replicate out a little bit across the state. And maybe we'll see them in communities like Russellville or whatever, where there is more access. But I also think that we will continue to overwhelmingly see parents choose their local public schools. Like, all my kids are in Russellville public schools, and I'm happy that they're there. But what I do love, one thing that I love about LEARNS, there's tons of things, but like, I love that it's forcing school boards and superintendents and administrators to have a different conversation. What I'm starting to see now is school boards say, hey, how are we going to be the school of choice in our county? Superintendents are saying that. And competition breeds higher expectations and getting better. And so maybe people still can be against it and be angry about it, but you can't argue that it is forcing competition and it's forcing conversations from public schools to be better and do better. And I think that ultimately matters. It sort of like raises everybody up, right? And so,
as the Senate Pro Tem, how much do you get to steer legislation or stop it, promote it? Tell me about what is the power of the Senate Pro Tem?
This is the I think, greatest misunderstanding of all. I've seen tons of things on Facebook, like I'm going to control the committees and what bills get through. And, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of power to, wield around. My perspective is that I have as much power, I say that in air quotes, as the 34 other members of the Senate allow me. The Speaker of the House is much more powerful in a different way, I think, because there's 100 of them and there's, so many things going on over there. But for us in the Senate, we really value our independence as individual members.
Of course.
And we all got there the same way. Like, I'm elected just like the person in South Arkansas is elected. And so there's no, I'm not really like directing or getting to, kill bills or let things through. Committee chairs are, I think, can be pretty powerful depending on how they choose to run their committee.
Sure.
But honestly, there's so few of us and, there's 8 of us on a committee. So you need 5 votes to get a bill out of committee. Well, that's not that many, but also you don't have a lot of wiggle room because there's only 8. So you have to work really hard just as a member to get your stuff through. So there's no great power. I think it's a lot of like grunt work. And I don't even mean that in a there's all this work that has to be done to make a session go smoothly and to make sure that we stay on the same page as the House. And, we got to get out on this date and we've got these big pieces of legislation and what does the executive branch want? And so it's like that kind of work that you're really making sure we're all like moving together. There's no stragglers. That's where the real work is, I think.
Okay. So I want to hear what you're excited about for the next session. Before I give you like my overarching targets, I'm curious if you have one where you say like, okay, we're all about as the Republicans to do blank with the state over the next like 5+ years.
Gosh. Well, I know like this is obvious, like continue reducing the state income tax. We've been pledging for like a decade to phase that out. Yeah. And I think that's like the big thing. So everything we do, we're doing it like with that in mind, right? For me, I would love to see it. I think the headline for next session is going to be Medicaid for a lot of different reasons. I mean, it's a huge part of the state budget, but there's some things we've got to take care of. I'd love to see us work on the waiver, on the waiver wait list and all of that. And then the services we provide adults with disabilities. That's not 5 years. I mean, that is long term or whatever, but I think it's hard to say because there's plenty of things we'll want to do, but we'll also be changing a lot who's in the legislature and what their priorities are.
Well, you want to hear it? And you can steal it. Yeah. You can just shamelessly steal any good ideas and you can throw in the trash can the ideas that you think are horrible. I think that, look, we've got a GDP of around $150 billion. And so that makes us the smallest around all of our neighboring states with the possible exception of Mississippi. And, so I think what I would shoot for is to say that we're going to create as many economic opportunities as jobs over the next decade as we possibly can. We're going to enhance the infrastructure so that we're keeping up with the Joneses and we're ahead. And that includes things like maximizing the outdoor spaces, and that we would, continue to maintain public trust and improve things like health outcomes and education outcomes. So that's kind of broad, maybe kind of basic, but here's what my ideas are. And then you can just tell me if you think they're dumb or not. And so you can tell me if this is anything that everybody's going to do. So I do agree with you on taxes. I think we need to continue to lower taxes. And I would give the last 2 administrations an A on this for what you guys have done so far. So I think that's good. We've gone from 6.9 to 3.9, 7.1 to 3.9%. And when you look at the total taxes in the state of Arkansas, property, sales tax, et cetera, even though people focus on that income tax, we do have a low tax environment, which is really, really cool. I would work on protecting the Fourth Amendment. So this is around privacy. So I worry about AI and what AI is going to do to people's privacy. So I would I don't know, do you care about, not that you care about it, but is it something you guys talk about?
Yeah, it is something we talk about. And I would say it's something we're talking about more now. I mean, because it changes so quickly. And it's just, how do you even address it in a way that matters? Like if we go in session in January and pass something, well, the landscape of AI is like already changed by April, right? So it's complicated.
Well, it used to be like, hey, you took a nude picture and like, hey, I didn't do that, so I don't care if everybody has my pictures. But I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue is that if, like if somebody wants to dream up a social score, hey, you didn't say, hello to the barista at the coffee shop, minus a point. You didn't show up at church, whatever. I also think that, getting our share of AI is important, but like, I don't know if like your Facebook's probably lit up with what happened in Louisiana last week when they was disclosed that all these guys signed NDAs around that facility. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I think getting the AI right is like the data centers right. But like, I'm in the camp of we need the data centers. We need the jobs and the infrastructure here. So we got to figure that out without necessarily like, having taxpayers pay for it, And so, that's one of the things that I would work on. I don't know if you agree with that or disagree with that, but
Yeah, I do think it's so like I'm lit up on Facebook about data centers. Like people are always tagging and stuff, and they're just like against them. And I'm like, okay, what do we even know about data centers? And and they're very different now than the old one. Like there's all these things, sort of what you said. Like they're paying for the infrastructure and water. They're quiet now. There are all these things. But here's an example. I was at a meeting last week, and a person who's on city council. Our city council brought up just talking about like a moratorium against, on data centers. And he said, I don't really know anything about data centers. I don't know more than the average Facebook user, just some things I see on Facebook. And then he just talked about why he was against it. And I'm like, you are elected to like research information. You shouldn't be having careless conversations, in my opinion, on the city council on a stage like that, where one's not even coming here, but we're also partnering very well with Johnson County on their data center.
Oh, of course.
And so there's like all these trickle down things that are going to be really impactful to our community and our county. But you have people who are just reading, again, like I said, 3 people in Mongolia are running a Facebook page and putting articles in your algorithm, and you don't know the truth.
Yeah, so I would add to this my last couple ones. So the other thing that I would do is I actually think, like, I bet if I went and looked at the statutes of the state of Arkansas, I bet it's thousands of pages. God knows how big it is. Yeah. I would rip that thing into pieces and eliminate certain things. So like, I always think that, we do excess things like, I'll bet the state of Arkansas requires you to have a barber's license to cut hair and charge people money. I don't know that for sure, but I'm just going to, and you take a look at like my hair where I don't have any, and you sit there and say like, does someone really need a license to cut my hair? Like, do we need to control barbers in that way? So I think there's all sorts of things that, people think make them safer, or they think they could, but really they're just friction. I would push the concept of lowering out-of-state tuition for people coming to Arkansas. I think we need more younger people here. We have a brain drain in a way. And I think anything we can do to bring kids from other places here to kind of see our state would be a positive thing. So I would accelerate that and say, we want your young kids here. We'll take them, because we don't have enough spots. If you add up the people that graduate high school that then go to college, we got a ton of places where we can put kids. I'm curious, like, what is your top 3? Medicaid, that's a big deal. Because I'm going to guess the total cost of healthcare in the state of Arkansas is about $30 billion. It's a huge number. If you add up it's a huge number.
Yeah.
What are you guys going to do with Medicaid?
Well, I don't have the answers for that yet, but we're going to have to do something. The one big beautiful bill said that like our Medicaid program, AR Homes, has to be budget neutral. And I think we're going to have to like work through that and figure out what we're going to do to get that waiver and make it neutral. So I just, it's never ending. And it's kind of, it's a little unfair in Arkansas because like our rates are so low.
Oh my God.
But It's because like the federal government, 50 years ago, whatever, like determined what our rates were. And there's this story that I don't remember all the details, so I won't tell the whole thing. But in general, like the president was mad at like one of our congressmen or one of our U.S. senators and said our rate's pretty low, just sort of like as a retaliation. And so here we are today. So the money that we get the match it's just all messed up, and there's nothing really that we can do about it because it literally take an act of Congress to fix it. Yeah, so we're dealing with what we have. And
well, if you want to listen to any sort of information on it, just here's a plug. I haven't done this before, but I actually, I've interviewed Troy Wells, who runs all of Baptist, and we went down the rabbit hole of all this and all the money. I interviewed the head of Blue Cross Blue Shield to get an insurance perspective, rural hospitals, because we have an issue where we've got primary care scarcity, 75 counties, a number of them don't have a primary care physician. Even in Russellville, we don't have specialties. I could just go down the list of who we don't have, right? And so these are all issues around healthcare, which gets back to the licensing. But what else is sort of interesting? Kind of what's the next couple things that you would say?
Well, speaking of education, you're right. Like one, I would love to tackle higher ed. I have so many thoughts on that. But I don't have a majority of people with me on it. Right. So there's some things I would love to do, with higher ed, but even in K-12, like I always say, I've yet to do it, but I'd love to have a session where we just have like a repeal package. And it's like, because we keep adding like all these things to schools and we're like, do this, teach that, Right. But it's like, we're never really like repealing anything. So like, where does all that stuff go? Like, how many layers do they have? And I would love to, like what you said, just like tear some stuff up, like just have a pile of bills. And there's just like lines through everything, and just get rid of some of that red tape. And I think that's something that Secretary Oliva is doing better at. He's like, schools are asking for like all these waivers that we approve, but he's like, why? Let's just like cut the red tape. Let them do it. Like, why do they have to ask us for permission if it's working for them? And so I think just looking at ways to be more like creative, maybe isn't the right word, but a little looser with public schools to be able to not like just the red tape. They're filling out all these forms, doing all this paperwork. Like, why? They should be teaching. That's what they want to be doing. So just trying to like lift the burden on teachers in the classroom. And so, there's so many little things. It's like I could do some rabbit holes on that, but yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate all that you do. You represent us well, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that, because it's, I want people in my community at home to be proud, of the way that I represent them. And I don't want to embarrass people. I want to vote well, but I also want to act well. So I appreciate that. And it's kind of fun to be on.
Have a wonderful day, and thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.